I miss you all, but I'm glad that we're still able to learn cool things. Today, we're going to learn about the animals of the Sonoran desert habitat, but before we can jump into that, I would like to review the things that we've learned about the Arctic habitat from our previous lesson. So, I want you to pause the video and go tell somebody at home about the different characteristics of the Arctic tundra and the Arctic Ocean, including their climate, so what the weather was like, the water, the ground, the plants, the animals, and then the adaptations or the changes that those plants and animals had to make in order to live in the Arctic tundra and Arctic Ocean. Go. All right, so when you're talking about the climate, you should have said that both are cold and windy. When talking about the water, you should have talked about how in the spring and the summer, when some of that ice melted, that's how the animals got their water for drinking. Even though there was a lot of water in the ocean, the animals can't drink that water because that water is salt water. For the ground, you should have talked about in the winter, there is a lot of ice on the ground and it's frozen ground. And in the summer, it got wet and muddy with some ice. And that the oceans had chunks of ice floating in the water. For the plants, you should have talked about the moss and the grasses on the tundra and about how they grew close together and really only in those spring and summer months. For the animals, you should have talked about the musk oxen, the wolverines, the caribou, the Arctic foxes, the Arctic hares, the walruses, the seals, and the polar bears. For adaptations, you could have talked about how those animals are going to have heavy fur, maybe fur layers. They're going to have fur that can change color. They have unique feet characteristics like the hooves of the caribou that change, which was probably one of my favorite things that I learned in the previous lesson. You learned about the polar bears having large webbed paws that are going to help them swim. And you also learned about the blubber on the walruses, the seals, and the polar bears that helped them stay warm. What does adapted mean? What does adapted mean, guys? Exactly. Adapted means that something has changed over time to be better prepared or better able to do something. We have adapted our teaching style by going from teaching inside the school where you come into the classroom and you sit down and we are all together in person. We went from that to moving everything online. So now instead of coming into the classroom, you're at home or maybe in the car watching YouTube videos and doing most of your work through the internet. That's how we adapted. Pretty cool, right? Today we're going to be learning about a habitat called a desert and about some of the animals that live in that habitat. What do you already know about deserts from early world civilizations unit that we had? Think about ancient Egypt and ancient Mesopotamia and the way that they lived. That's right. It was really hot there. There wasn't much water. It was dry. And it was pretty hard for them to grow crops. This is a picture of a desert. What do you see? I'm seeing a lot of sand. Not really seeing trees. I see some plants. All right. How is this different than the pictures that you saw of the Arctic? Okay, yeah, there's no snow. Anything else? No snow, no ice, no ocean. All right, so the temperature that's found in a desert is almost exactly the opposite of what is found in the Arctic. Remember, the Arctic is very cold, and the desert are usually going to be really hot. Okay, the Arctic can get wet and muddy in the summer, whereas the desert is going to stay very dry and very sandy. So keeping that in mind, do you think that the animals that live in the Arctic are going to live in the desert? No, probably not. Why not? Exactly, because the ones that live in the Arctic have adapted and changed so that they can live in those cold and snowy environments. And if they tried to go into the desert, they'd probably get too hot. So what kind of animals do you think could live in the desert? And how are those going to be different from what live in the Arctic? Let's see if you're right. So there are deserts all over the world, okay? But today we're going to hear about a particular desert that is located in the northwestern part of Mexico and the southwestern part of the United States, more specifically Arizona and California. This particular desert, located here, is called the Sonoran Desert. All right, guys, that's where we are learning about today. I want you to listen carefully to find out more about the Sonoran Desert and how the animals have adapted to living there. After nearly freezing and almost becoming a polar bear snack in the Arctic, I thought we should go someplace where my whiskers and tail could thaw out and warm up, so I brought you to the desert. There are many deserts all over the world. You know you're in a desert when it doesn't rain very much. Many deserts can also be very hot. Because it is so hot and dry, only certain types of plants and animals can live there. Welcome to the Sonoran Desert in the southwestern part of the United States and the northwestern part of Mexico. The temperature is quite hot during the day, and it doesn't rain very much. The heat and lack of rain make it hard for some plants and animals to live in the desert. They must all be specifically adapted to live in the hot weather and survive with very little rain. How do they do it? Some plants can save and store water inside their plant parts when it does rain. Other plants grow only in shady areas near mountains or rocks. Because there are very few plants that can be used as shelter, the animals have adapted to living in the desert. The animals that have adapted to living in the desert often seek shelter underground and make their homes under the sand. Living underground helps them stay cool when it gets hot, and it keeps them hidden from other animals that might want to eat them for lunch. What do you guys see in this picture? That's right, a cactus. Ouch! What did I walk into? Aha! Here's one plant that lives in the Sonoran Desert. The Saguaro Cactus is the world's largest cactus. Cacti don't have leaves. They have prickly spines instead, which is exactly why it hurt so much to touch this one. The word cacti is plural for cactus. One cactus, but many cacti. The incredible saguaro lives for up to 200 years, and in that time it can grow as high as a house and can weigh as much as several cars. The most amazing thing about the saguaro is it is a habitat in itself. That's right, not only does it manage to live and thrive in the desert habitat by just being there, it provides food, water, and shelter to many different animals. Let me get my climbing gear out and some gloves to protect me from these sharp spines, and I'll meet you at the top. You already know that it hardly ever rains in the desert, but when it does, the saguaro cactus saves and stores huge quantities of water in the roots and stems. So guys, the roots are here, the roots are down in the ground, and then the stems are here, okay? The cactus saves the extra water and uses it to survive during those times when it is very dry and it does not rain. In the spring, white flowers grow on the saguaro. At night, when the desert cools down, these flowers open to show sweet nectar, which butterflies, bats, and birds feed on before the flowers close the next day when it once again becomes very hot. In the summer, red fruit begins to grow on the saguaro. Many animals eat the fruit of the cactus. Here is an interesting bird called the Gila Woodpecker. The Gila Woodpecker pecks holes into the soft cactus with its beak to make a nest for its eggs. The Gila Woodpecker is an omnivore. An omnivore is an animal that eats plants as well as other animals. Gilas feed on cactus, fruit, and berries as well as insects that have invaded the saguaro. Thankfully, I brought a sandwich, so I won't have to join these Gilas for a buggy lunch. It really is way too hot for a regular rat like me to live here. I'm glad I brought my fan with me. Interestingly enough, Birds like this Gila woodpecker can live in the desert habitat because their feathers help protect them from the hot desert sun by trapping cool air next to their skin. Still, most birds only go out to feed in the early morning or evening when it is cooler outside. From noon to late afternoon, many of these birds seek shelter in the holes that they have dug in a cactus or in other shady places. Here's another bird that makes its home in the Saguaro Cactus, the elf owl. The elf owl, the world's smallest owl, is only 5 inches long. That's just a bit bigger than one of your hands. It moves into the nests that have been abandoned by Gila woodpeckers. When something is abandoned, guys, that means that it's been left for good, okay? So the Gila woodpeckers, they're not coming back to those nests, and that's when the elf owls use it. They're like recycling, pretty much. The elf owl, is like most owls, is nocturnal, which means that it rests during the day and it wakes during the night to hunt for food. The elf owl is also a carnivore. A carnivore is an animal that eats only other animals, no plants. It uses its large eyes to hunt in the dark night for bugs that live in the desert. Most owls eat mice, and sad to say, rats. But I think I'm safe from the elf owl because I'm bigger than it is. Isn't that funny? The rat is bigger than this owl because remember that owl is only about 5 inches long, which isn't very big. Oh look, here comes a desert cottontail rabbit, another animal that lives in the Sonoran desert. The desert cottontail looks a little like the Arctic hare we saw in the tundra, but it has larger ears and longer back legs. What were some of the ways the Arctic hare had adapted to the tundra? Do you remember? Yeah, it had smaller ears, so less of its body was exposed to the cold, and it had white fur to blend in. Remember, it also had larger, wider back feet so that it could run fast in the snow. Desert cottontail rabbits are herbivores. Herbivores are animals that eat only plants, no animals. The desert cottontail eats grass and even cacti. Smaller animals like the desert cottontail always need to watch out for larger animals in the desert that might eat them. Many animals and plants are part of a cycle called the food chain. You will learn more about the food chain in the next read loud. Coyotes, for instance, like to eat rabbits. In fact, there's a coyote coming this way, so let's stay up here and watch it. Coyotes are found all over the United States, including the Sonoran Desert. As you can see, the coyote has a light tan-colored coat to help reflect the sun's rays and camouflage it. To camouflage something means to make it blend in with its surrounding. The color of the coyote's fur blends in with the color of the desert sand, so it is difficult for other animals to see the coyote in the desert background, all right? Coyotes are carnivores, like the elf owls. Coyotes have very good senses of smell, hearing, and vision, and they can run very fast, which means they are excellent hunters. They are also scavengers. Scavengers are animals that eat meat and waste that is left by other animals. Coyotes live in dens, which they make by burrowing into the ground. I think this one has smelled something because he just ran off. Now I'm going to get down from this cactus before another coyote comes along to make me its dinner. It seems like rats are on the menu everywhere I go. Alright guys, that was the end of that read loud, so I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. So, were your predictions about whether the desert animals were different from the Arctic animals, were they correct? Were they right? So, I thought there was probably some kind of bunny rabbit, some kind of hare, in the desert because there seem to be rabbits everywhere. But I didn't know that there were owls that were going to live inside of the cactus and that they were so small. That's something that I learned. So what is the weather and the temperature of the Sonoran Desert? Exactly. It's dry, it's hot, and there's not much rain. Do many plants and animals live in the desert? No. Why not? Exactly. It's very hot and it's very dry, which makes it hard for them to live there. How were the Arctic and Sonoran Desert different? The weather, right? The temperature. Okay, the Arctic was really cold, the Sonoran Desert was very hot. Also, the ground in the Arctic is covered with lots of ice, and the desert is covered with lots of sand. How are they the same? Okay, one way that they were the same is that the animals and plants that live in each habitat had to adapt to their very difficult conditions of each habitat. That's right. All right. How did the animals in the desert adapt to living there? Exactly. They came out at night. They made shelters underground or in cacti. They had feathers that trapped cool air. Okay. How did the animals find desert in the shelter? Shelter in the desert. Exactly. They went underground, or they made holes in plants like in the Saguaro Cactus. So we talked about the word camouflage. You heard me say the coyote has a light tan colored coat to camouflage it. Go ahead and say the word camouflage. You can say it like a mouse. You can say it in a whisper voice. You can say it in a monster voice. You can say it in a deep voice. Go ahead and say it a couple of times. Camouflage. 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 The Arctic hare's white coat served to camouflage it in the snowy Arctic tundra. Remember, camouflage means to blend in with surroundings. So if the color of the object or animal is similar to the background, it makes it harder for the animals to see it. Okay? What types of things could be camouflaged in green grass? So you remember, if it's going to be camouflage, it has to be kind of the same color as that grass. What's the word we've been talking about, guys? Camouflage, yes. So I'm going to describe something to you, and you should decide how you could camouflage it, okay? So if I say a green leaf, you could say, I could camouflage that by placing it in green grass. If I said a white piece of paper, how could you camouflage that? You could put it on a white floor. What about a black cat? I've got a black kitty. I could camouflage her by putting her outside when it's nighttime. It would be really hard to see her, right? What about an Arctic hare? I could camouflage that by placing it on a snowy surface, right, guys? And what about a yellow pencil? I could camouflage a yellow pencil by putting it in a vase of yellow flowers. I want you to see if today you could find something in your home and camouflage it with other things that look like it. That is one thing that I would like for you to do. The rest of your assignment is going to be on Google Classroom, so look at that as soon as this video is over. I hope you guys are doing well. Like I said earlier, we miss you so, so, so much. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.